here. So if you appreciate the work that we do, don't forget to share this broadcast with your friends, with your family members. We're going to be going live for the next 2 hours. The conversation on Rumble definitely is going to get spicy. There's a lot of woo-woo topic. There's a lot of health topics that I definitely want to talk about. And you could participate in that conversation by, of course, also very simply and easily signing up to lukeunfiltered.com. We have memberships as low as $8 a month. And with your membership, you, of course, get the ability to call in and sign in and be able to ask us whatever question you want to ask us, all specifically on lukeunfiltered.com. When you sign up, you get a lot of different incredible things, and you being a part of the conversation is one of those things that you get. You could also be a part of the conversation by going to mysuperchat.com and, of course, super chatting us with just a 3% service charge. YouTube takes 30%, mysuperchat.com takes 3%, and your super chat actually shows up on screen, which is really cool and really amazing. We, of course, will be reading off all the super chats, all the Rumble rants, all the mysuperchats.com, as, of course, your support of this independent media organization is crucial and absolutely important. As, of course, the conversation today is definitely going to be a very interesting one, as we got a lot of really awesome people in studio today. The first one of which is the one and only Mike Cernovich. Mike, for the people who might not know you and might be living under a rock, who are you and how would you introduce yourself?
Well, I'm making a movie, so I would just go by filmmaker now, but I shapeshift a little bit. So in 2024, we'll call myself a filmmaker.
The David Icke shapeshift or the other kind of shapeshift?
I like to keep things ambiguous, right? Let the audience interpret what they want from the shape-shifting.
I love it. Phil Labonte is also in the house. Phil, people who don't know you, who are you?
My name is Phil Labonte. I am the lead vocalist for the heavy metal band All That Remains. I'm also a contributor at timcast.com, IRL kind of thing. Yeah,
that's something. You know, that's something out there. I've heard a little bit about it on the social medias. It's just a little bit there.
Some things and stuff.
Josie, the redheaded libertarian, also is in the house. How are you?
Hi, I'm Josie, the redheaded libertarian. I'm on X at TRHL Official, and I do outside media work at timcast.com, and I moonlight as a demonic calendar model.
Oh, yeah. I could definitely see the demonic aspect here. Clint Russell,
Yo.
The one and only Liberty Lockdown podcast dude who helped us set up these limp microphones.
Yeah. Well, aside from that, I also bought everything to make this actually happen. So, yeah, you're welcome. Clint Russell at Liberty Lockpod on X. Liberty Lockdown is the host of Liberty Lockdown, co-host of Tower Gang, and most importantly, co-host of the best political show.com. We've got a lot to cover. Let's hop in.
Someone said the audio might be a little bit too low. Too low. I think we just fixed that. But trust me, there's been a lot of technical difficulties. Clint's a G. Clint actually helped us out a lot to make this show happen. As of course, it's been a lot of work, but it's definitely.
His father, a couple of weeks ago or a week or two ago, apparently he had double pneumonia in both lungs. He was dealing with another bronchial infection as well. He was having a hard time breathing. If he would get up and walk around, he would pass out. So if I understand correctly, he was, getting poor treatment in the Ukrainian hospital. They looked at him as a spy, essentially, or some kind of Russian asset. And I don't know how true it is. I've never been to a Ukrainian prison, but you hear stories about Eastern European prisons, and I can't imagine that they're based on total imagination. They're really rough spots, and the same thing probably with the healthcare in a country like Ukraine, which is in the middle of a war with massive, shelling and conflict all over the place. So it's not a surprise that he passed away. I don't know if there's anything more nefarious than the fact that he was in an unfriendly country, criticizing the unfriendly country while he's there. Like, that's dangerous stuff.
Yeah, I say it is a surprise because the Ukrainian government essentially held an American citizen captive. They were responsible for his health and well-being, and clearly, whether it was an accident, whether it was natural health that got Gonzalo, they were still responsible for his safety and well-being. I hold them accountable for what they did to one of our citizens, and this is outrageous. This is a country that we have given so much of our tax dollars to finance this larger war, and now they're treating our American citizens in horrendous conditions where they die afterwards. That's just unacceptable, in my opinion.
And torture is a war crime. And then on top of all of this, we're sending money out to defend Ukraine's democracy. And at the same time, what are they doing over there that's democratic? They're canceling elections and they're closing churches and they're jailing reporters. None of that is democratic. And, then they're conscripting citizens to fight in the war. This is not a democracy. This is I don't know what this is.
Yeah, and then for criticizing the regime there to be essentially sentenced, that's just totally outrageous. Tucker Carlson just tweeted about this, and he talks about how Lira was an American citizen who was tortured in a Ukrainian prison since July for the crime of, quote, criticizing Zelensky. Biden officials approve of this because they like to apply the same standards here. The media agrees. Here's a statement from Gonzalo Lira's father as he released the 19-minute video now on his X profile that, of course, people could watch now. Mike, you had a different kind of perspective on this. You tweeted the Ukrainian regime murdered a U.S. citizen, and I agree with your take. This is absolutely crazy and in my opinion, totally unacceptable.
Also predictable, though. Good old Gonzo, he was... I think a problem that people who grew up or spent too much time in America realize is the rest of the world isn't like it here, right? And because I followed his stuff when he was Coach Red Pill, I'm aware of his shenanigans or whatever. Not to speak ill of the dead, what happened was his wrong, obviously. I think for a lot of people though, they're operating under a strange sort of denial. So everyone says, "Oh, the regime wants us locked up and dead." But I'm going to go to Ukraine and criticize Zelensky. And you're like, well, why would you do that? And then now some people are going, oh, victim blaming, I should be able to do. There's this mindset like, well, I should be able to do it. It's like, well, great, you can't. Sorry for you. So what happened with him, the problem I have, though, with what happened is he had pneumonia. He didn't commit any crimes. If you actually follow what he did, he was kind of clumsy. Even the Russian with attitude guys kind of like made fun of him. They saw him as kind of bumbling his way through things. Yeah. So the idea that he was committing espionage was, of course, laughable. So he didn't do any of that. He was just sort of stumbling around, and then he started going viral a little bit. You get that buzz. Mm-hmm. And then the Ukrainians first kind of gave him a friendly warning that he should leave, and he admitted that actually when he was at the border video. They said, hey, you might want to leave, and he didn't. So then he got arrested, released, and then, of course, we all saw that master-long thread where he was trying to get to the border and leave Ukraine. So there's really it's not surprising to me that they killed him. I assumed that he was already dead and we hadn't heard from him. Mm-hmm. And it should be appalling and it should be news and everything, but like nobody cares, dude. The regime doesn't care. No. Media doesn't care. That's what's going to happen to you if you go into these areas. So even me, I won't travel. I had a lot of trips, planned in Europe, and I won't travel because they'll just kidnap you, dude. Yeah. That's the whole thing. America, we've been propagandized to believe that we're freeing the oppressed, blah, blah, blah. Dude, they will kidnap you so fast if you're anywhere close to Ukraine. A gang will. They will torture you, post it on Telegram, and laugh about it. So I'm not even critical of you. I feel bad for Ukraine. Because all their men got killed, so that our DC establishment can launder money. So I'm actually so pro-Ukrainian. I didn't want 200 or 300 or 400 or 500,000 of them to die, which was inevitable. But even then, they'll put you on some list and they'll kill you. That's just the reality. It's like mess with the cartels. Yeah. If I criticize the cartels all the time, I wouldn't go to Mexico. I even mind my P's and Q's with the cartels because they'll take a trip up and handle you anyway. You got to realize what you're dealing with.
Eastern Europe is it's not like you were saying. It's Eastern Europe, and there's a lot of places in the world that are not like the West, and people in the West have this idea that, well, because I'm an American or I'm from Canada or the U.S. or the U.K., like bad things don't happen to me, and that is just not the case. It's just not the case at all.
But we're fighting for democracy. We're fighting for freedom. We're fighting for the liberation of the Ukrainian people.
I was under the impression that on this channel that we could speak honestly and not have to sit there and repeat narratives that were given to us from from on high. But I think that it shouldn't really be a surprise what happened. Not that, again, that's not an endorsement, but like the whole of the Ukrainian war is like Mike was saying, the whole point is for money laundering and to keep some kind of conflict going essentially for the the war pigs or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you made a point at lunch that I thought was very interesting and very important. And I don't know if you want me to bring it up, but you essentially said something to the point where they need some kind of conflict. They need some kind of war. And I think Ukraine is that kind of war that they're able to do a lot of their other seedy kind of behavior, which also doesn't just include trading arms, but of course, trading people, human trafficking, and having an excuse just to... I go as far as to say sacrifice children at the altar of Baphomet, but that might be too much for some individuals. But that's just my own personal take on it.
I think we're actually missing the bigger point is that Gonzalo was an American journalist. Maybe he was bumbling and stumbling and whatever. But the reality is the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian government is only standing in the deteriorated state that it is because of American taxpayer dollars. If our State Department doesn't see fit to go and free an American journalist while we are keeping them alive.
Apply pressure. They did
nothing.
There was no State Department messages sent to say, "Hey, look, this is an American," and there was nothing.
That's the whole point. Like, I had trips planned that I canceled after the Ukrainian war broke out because all you need it's all mafia controlled. It really is more like the movie Taken in Ukraine. It really is like that in a lot of parts. So my beef, not beef, the wrong way to put it, but my frustration with people who understand the truth is you're like, oh yeah, all these things are happening, but I'm gonna hop on a train in Ukraine, dude. You couldn't get me anywhere near that country. I wouldn't even go to a bordering country. I don't even know. Well, maybe Serbia, because the Ukrainians might not mess around in Serbia, but I don't even know that I would risk a trip to the former Yugoslav Republic. So that's where our people or people who watch this, they have this childish belief that you can just walk wherever you want because it's moral, it's principles, whatever. Like, it isn't. So the State Department, why didn't they say anything? Because they think it's funny, because they would do that here if they could. So they think it's funny that this happened to him.
Kind of doing it to Assange right now, right?
Well, they did to Assange for 10 years, right? He was kept under wraps. They made Snowden go to Russia, remember? But then now they say he was a Russian asset. The only reason he's in Russia because they interrupted his flight. So that's just a whole lie. It's like the people watching, they know the truth, but then they can't connect the final dot. It's like, oh, I have this forbidden knowledge. It's like you're not a little kid and you read a book, Harry Potter, and now you know the secrets of the magical kingdom, dude. Like when people like me say they want to kill you and hunt you down, this isn't hyperbole or I want you to click on the tweet. This is objectively true. So then you have to avoid situations where they're going to be able to kidnap and murder you. So for me, that means I canceled a lot of planned travel.
Yeah, there's a lot of different rules to this game that you really have to follow carefully. And this is a escalation. This is a changing of the rules where essentially they're saying, we don't care if you're an American citizen. We don't care if you're a journalist. We'll take you out. And they did this under Obama's regime. They did this with his deposition matrix. They did this with Barack Obama personally signing off on the extrajudicial assassination of American citizens and teenagers. So now we see the same kind of policies being brought back by the Biden administration through a proxy, through, of course, a government that we are heavily influencing by giving them a crap ton of money, a crap ton of arms, a country that is extremely corrupt and has a history of having their politicians bought off. The Russians used to buy off their politicians. Now the Americans are buying off their politicians, as the corruption in Ukraine is pretty palpable, to say the least. Scott Adams tweeted in regards to this story, quote, "You have to know the players. Once you do, you learn that everything you suspected about Ukraine appears to be true." Well, and this is a big escalation, in my opinion.
Well, and they're hard people. I think another aspect of this that Americans miss especially is I'm not going to say I have a pretty harsh view on the world, which is you shouldn't go into another person's country and mess around.
Yeah.
Just like Johnny Somali going in Japan. He's lucky that that's all that happened to him. If he'd have done that in Ukraine or something, they would have handled them. So what people in the West especially don't understand is whether it's through genetics, harsh environment, people have their own theories. Eastern Europeans are a different breed, but people kind of look at them and say, oh, they look like us and talk like us. They must be soft Westerners, and they don't. They have a strong ethnic identity. Mm-hmm. They are real nationalists. American nationalists aren't real nationalists. We pretend to be. They're real nationalists. Like, no, this is my country. I'm Ukrainian. So the irony in all of this is that the Ukrainian nationalists didn't realize that they were being Pied Pipered into eliminating the problem of the globalists, right? So the real thing with Ukraine that isn't talked about often enough is that if you're the globalists, you think, well, why don't we propagandize our nationalists into believing that they can beat Russia because the U.S. is going to help us and give us everything we want, and then we can just get rid of that problem. Because nationalists in any kind of country are a huge problem for the globalist regime. So then they, I've heard 500,000, I've heard 200,000. All I know is a friend of mine was in Kiev very recently, and he said, you don't see a man anywhere because they're all in hiding because they don't want to be kidnapped, or you see men with their legs blown off, right? So the men are either gone or they have their legs blown off. So how many hundreds of thousands is that? We don't know. And the participation of the nationalists in Ukraine, so fortunately Poland learned that lesson because they're pushing back against the globalists in Poland. But you look at how quick the Polish people had to fight back. So that's what happened here is Ukrainian nationalists got Pied Pipered into a war with Russia, directed by our demonic administration or regime. And they're gone, dude. And I don't know how people can't be sad about that.
Yeah, it's an entire generation of people that will never come back. That Zelensky says he's just going to replace by allowing migrants to come on in and fulfill the Goldman Sachs and the BlackRock contracts that they have.
How disgusting is that? He's like, we'll just replace them as if they weren't people. Like that is just.
And that's the problem with the national. That's where like Ayn Rand and other people criticize nationalism, and I found the critiques compelling, and I still do. Because you can Pied Piper nationalists into this. So I've always told people, you need to actually think more like the globalists. The globalists it's like I tell people, I don't live in America. I live in a country that's occupied by a hostile regime, the same as when the Nazis occupied Paris, the same as when the Soviets occupied Poland. I don't have a country, and if more people think like that, which the articles on recruiting show that's catching on as a view, then they can't Pied Piper us. Oh, we got to fight the Houthis. It's our patriotic duty, bro. So the Ukrainians, they had that nationalism, and then it's like, oh, Russia's taking over land. It's like, what land are they taking over? They're taking over ethnically Russian land. It's a line on a map and they're all Russians, and they want to be with Russia anyway. And the Nazis are bombing them, so the Russians had a moral cause to move in there. But if you're too nationalistic, then the globalists, just like they did post 9/11. Oh, this is about America and everything. So
Mike,
that's what we got to think more.
Once you do accept that reality that you don't actually have a representative government and that you're being ruled by foreign or just evil entities or however you want to look at it, I have certainly embraced that perspective as well. I'm just curious, like, what next? Like, once you have that realization, what do you do with it?
Well, it's great because you're free from the traps, right? All the traps are. So I remember post 9/11 patriotism surge. We'll never have military like that again in our life. The post 9/11 military was the smartest, most professional. You had you had people like Pat Tillman giving up NFL careers. You had guys giving up Wall Street careers. It was the most patriotic force that you're ever going to have in the world because there was still that American nationalism. And what happened? I mean, like, because I never deployed, and I used to feel like, oh man, I missed the boat on that. I wish I had. It kind of bothered me. But almost everybody I know who deployed is like, I can't believe I deployed. I am so pissed off. I was like, oh shit, it's like grass is always greener. I was always like, man, dude, I can't believe I missed my opportunity.
I was a young child. I had that same feeling in 2001 in New York City, growing up around everything. I was like, I want to be in the military. I want to enlist. I even signed up. I was like, hey, I'm a young child. I want to be a part of the military, because that was the kind of feeling we were all kind of left with, propagandized after this huge kind of emotional manipulation that kind of took over everything. Phil, I'm sorry, you had something to say?
No, go ahead. You're saying.
No.
I was just going to say I was, I think 17, 18 when it happened, and I had so many friends that wanted to enlist. I was fortunate in that I was very anti-war very early on. So I actually talked two of my best friends out of enlisting, and it was funny. They actually didn't. They wanted to enlist right before 9/11 happened. Now that I remember, and And they said, "What's the last war we've been in? Desert Storm? There's going to be no wars." And then we were just like 20 years of constant war right after that. It's amazing that shift that happened right after.
Well, I had a friend of mine, it happened to him where he was in a Ranger battalion, which, if you're not at war, is about the worst experience you can have in your life. And his time came up, so he got out because nobody thought it was going to be 20 years. So there are actually a lot of guys who wanted to go over, but like in my case, I was in law school and my time in the National Guard expired. So I was like, okay. A friend of mine was with the original invasion. So that they were the guys knocking down the statues and everything. And I was like, oh, well, that's over. My time's done. I'm kind of out of it. And then, because that's how everybody thought. Everybody thought, oh, you missed your opportunity, and you just kind of go on with your life. Nobody saw it was going to be 20 years. So that's why when you talk to guys who deployed or had multiple deployments, very few of them are like, oh, yeah, this is cool. I'm glad I did it. They're pretty angry about it.
Nothing. I think that nothing has spread like libertarian ideas more than the GWOT. The Global War on Terror turned a lot of young guys and young women, but a lot of young guys that believed in the government, believed in the system, were very patriotic after 9/11. They go to war and they come back, and then you see the massive surge of dudes that were endorsing Rand Paul in 2008. And same thing in 2012. And there's just this massive surge of dudes that went to war and, served honorably, but were like, this is not what it was supposed to be about. This is not, that kind of echoes what you heard from the dudes coming home from Vietnam. I was a young kid back then, but like, I remember stories, and I remember hearing my dad and his buddies talk about Vietnam because they were watching First Blood 2, Rambo.
Yep.
They were talking about what it was like and talking about the way that the government treated the GIs that were coming home and stuff. And you were starting to hear the guys that were in the Global War on Terror talking like that, there's all these things that have happened. There's all the people that are coming, getting sick because of all the burn pits and all that stuff. And there's all the problems with the VA that almost all are guaranteed to happen when you go to war, and then 20 years later you've got dudes that really need the help. Your VA's overrun with stuff. It's just something that you hear frequently from one generation to the next. You go to war, and constantly people are just like, it wasn't what it was supposed to be. It wasn't what I was sold, and I kind of
more U.S. service members supported Ron Paul than any other Republican presidential candidate out there, including when you even combined all the other Republican presidential candidates. And his main thing that he was running on is, these wars are dumb. These wars are pointless. These wars aren't in the interest of the American people or the American country. Why are we fighting them? And now we're kind of in a very similar situation with the latest events that are unfolding in Yemen. It's a little bit more complicated. It's not as simple, since trade routes are involved, and there's a longer history with Iranian influence over the Houthis. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit. But Clint, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, the corollary to the Vietnam vets is actually really good, because I grew up in San Diego, so I knew a ton of Marines, and they, all of them had some variant of shell shock from their time in the War on Terror. And some of them became, massive alcoholics. Many of them dealt with suicidal ideation. It's just really heartbreaking, and for someone who was already anti-war to then see the consequences for those that weren't and went and fought, valiantly, and to have them come back and be kind of a shell of themselves, it just really entrenched my worldview that these wars are not being fought for noble purposes. I'm not sure that hardly any wars are, but these certainly were not, and I hope that lesson is not lost, and I hope that it actually gets louder as it appears that we are, ramping up, or at least risking a world war on multiple fronts simultaneously.
Yeah, it falls. It's you can kind of, you can calibrate how people are falling for the psyops and not falling for the psyops, and the Houthi stuff is laughable. It's to the point now, which is, maybe the pendulum's gone too far. It's to the point now that if there were actually a terrorist attack on American soil and there were actually evidence that Iran were behind it, nobody's going to believe it. I wouldn't believe it. Not for a second. I don't care if it really did happen. No, who's going to believe that? No, nobody, dude. So when the Ukraine thing ramped up, there was no public support for that. They gave the money anyway because public support doesn't matter. And the regime is saying, well, how much can he get away with or whatever? But nobody fell for the Ukraine stuff. The Houthi stuff is kind of like a thing that people are laughing at, where if there is a war, like, well, who's going to fight it? Good luck with that. They're going to implement a draft. I mean, good luck with that. You had draft rights during Vietnam, and I can't imagine the draft rights that you would have today, right?
I
can't even begin to comprehend it. So I'm really curious about. That's probably why the regime is focused inward now, because everyone saw. There are things that are bad. So I think I tweeted out one time that I love the military-industrial complex, unironically, which people are angry. And there's the idea that, well, we just need to abolish our military-industrial complex. Yeah, because everybody else is good. So we shouldn't have. It's like, yeah, obviously it's evil, but you think like China's going to be nice to us now, or if you lay down your arms, that's the whole scam of it all. But so I'm seeing us in a predicament now where if you look at the tactics in Ukraine versus Russia, the American armaments used, the shortages of 155 artillery shells, if you look at the lack of a supply chain on anything from Patriot missiles, you're for an adversary, you would not be afraid of the U.S. Maybe the Houthis. I mean, we have enough naval power to, you could go full Gaza on them, and there's nothing they could really do about it. But if you're China or another superpower, there's nothing about American hard power that makes you think that you couldn't take Taiwan. Yeah. Right? You've watched it all play out, and he said taking Taiwan now is the easiest thing that we could imagine. We'll take it whenever we want.
Yeah, the Houthis aren't really that powerful. They're one of the poorest people on the face of the earth, and they're even mixing up Russian-specific vessels and thinking that they were UK vessels and attacking them right now as we're speaking. As the New York Times has an article just even trying to explain the situation here, saying, who are the Houthis and why is the U.S. attacking them? As I definitely agree with you and your sentiments here, Mike, and it would be very difficult for them to pull off another kind of Gulf of Tonkin incident. And I think this is why what happened in 2020 is the way that it kind of unfolded. And what's going to be happening next is going to be far more complex and not just as simple as the kind of old, archaic kind of false flag initiatives that they did with the U.S. Lusitania, the USS Maine. We could go all throughout history. So as our life becomes more technocratic, the kind of larger psyops that are being implemented against us also get a lot more advanced technologically in a way where it becomes a lot more sophisticated.
Quick reminder to the audience too. It's the Houthis have been in war against Saudi Arabia for 7-8 years now. Many people believe it's a proxy war between Saudi Arabia and Iran. I assume that's true, but I don't really know for sure. But they, as Luke said, they aren't just poor. They are the poorest nation in the Middle East. Like, they are very, very poor. But they are also obviously a very war friendly nation in terms of like I do tend to believe that they are being activated by Israel's assault on Gaza, and I think that's probably why they're willing to do what they're doing.
Well, that's what they originally stated. They said, hey, we're going to stop trade here in this major trade route that everyone is dependent on. Right. Trade prices have gone up dramatically because they're essentially attacking a lot of the boats moving in and out of their kind of territory. And they said, hey, we're going to stop attacking as long as Israel stops attacking Gaza. Exactly. And of course, that's not going to happen anytime soon because Benjamin Netanyahu is politically kind of entrenched in a situation where he knows if the conflict is over, his political career is over as well. So the situation there is also very complex. Now the United States and the UK sending all of their latest military hardware in order to be targets and to be targeted by these crazy radicals. I don't think that's a smart decision. I don't think that's a smart move here, and I think that only makes the situation that much more kind of complicated. As of course, the troops in Iraq are also being attacked. Yesterday, there was an attack on American troops in an Iraqi military base. So what we have a lot of military installations in the region, and they're just targets. Our soldiers, our people are just targets put on there because of the very horrible foreign policy decisions that are not in our best interest, our country's best interest. That's all unfolding right now in this very horrible situation where Gerald Celente even came out today and said World War III has started. It already began. It began with the Ukrainian war, and now it's only expanding here as the Houthis represent larger powers connected to the Iranians. They were essentially fighting Al-Qaeda that was supported by Saudi Arabia and the United States. The Associated Press had a very crazy article detailing all of this, specifically how Al Qaeda and the United States were working hand in hand trying to get rid of these Houthis many, many years ago, starting under the Obama administration. This campaign and Saudi Arabian coalition actually developed even more under Donald Trump's administration. Now China came in, stopped the war. Now the United States restarted it. And to me, war is dumb, and it makes absolutely no
there was
sense
a
at all.
famine in Yemen too, though, right? There's
Yes.
hundreds of thousands. Yeah, the Houthis are being played up by the regime as a way to, because what you said, Luke, is true earlier, that the psyops get more complicated, but you got to realize the politically incorrect truth about war is you need infantry and you need special operations, and if you go to an infantry battalion, they're overrepresented by a certain demographic. So if you read that military.com article where the military freaked out, or the army freaked out, where the white male recruitment is almost cut in half.
Yeah.
Because they're just, and I'm not even anti going in the military. I think a lot of people, there are opportunities, but the people who you need to believe the psyops are the people like the Ukrainian nationalists or the American nationalists, and those tend to be white, especially white Christian males, and they're not going to fall for anything. So let's say the Houthis or the U.S. more likely bombs a ship as a false flag, and then blame it on the Houthis. I don't know anybody, and I talked, I keep in touch with the vibes. I don't know anybody's falling for this. I don't know I know what the conservative media podcasters are going to say, like, oh, it's time for us to go over whatever. Their audience is fucking dorks. The people who watch those are fucking dorks.
Mm-hmm.
They're not going.
Right.
So the kind of people who are, because I was in, you were in, my friends deployed and did all the cool guy shit that there are literally movies about. They're not going. They don't know anybody who's going.
Mm-mm.
So who's going to do it? And that's
the
the
LGBTQ army.
Our people aren't even going to. Even if it's true, they won't believe it.
Yep.
That's the real problem that I see as the biggest national security threat I see is, okay, oh shit, what do we do if there's a real pandemic now?
If something actually happens.
Yeah, what do we do if there's a real attack? They're not going to believe anybody. Right.
And that could be the bigger play here that we should kind of understand here, because they could set up a situation where they kind of provoke someone to do something, whether it's Echo Health Alliance or another foreign adversary or another foreign country. And then we're going to think that, oh, this is them doing this again. Let's not fall for it. But in reality, it could actually be a real threat out there, too, which is something that we should think about with just how unfair the entire establishment and system have been to us, and putting us in this precarious situation that no matter what happens, we're so distrustful. We're so pissed off that we're just not going to believe anything, even if it's legitimate, which is a threat against us and our national security as well.
That's clearly where we are now. I mean, you can go on X and no matter what the story is, there are people that are going to adamantly let you know that you're a fool for believing this. No matter, it could be something that you personally experienced yourself, and there are people out there that just will not believe things that come from the wrong source, and
or any source. They like
Fair
people. So yeah, there is a segment of people who are dumb, but they think they're so smart that they can see angles that you can't.
Yeah.
The one angle though, like with the Houthis especially, is I personally, and this is why they're being played up as a threat. Nobody in the Navy or Marines actually thinks you couldn't take them out pretty quick.
Yeah.
But that's why the media, so that's why they announced, these airstrikes. Dude, they could have taken out 50,000 of these people in a night and not told anybody. But the regime needs to play it up as a threat to make people, there's a new boogeyman now. But people are like, well, they're not really a boogeyman. So if we really wanted to handle it, the military could, and I might not even actually have a problem. I might actually not even have a problem with the real display of it. But then you get into the whole human rights and blah blah blah. Innocent people. It becomes a whole problem. But
I mean, setting aside the innocent lives that would be lost, I think even tactically, this is a dangerous path to take. Just simply because the Muslim world is already so furious at what's happening to the Palestinians. If you then ramp it up and you have the UK and the US that's going, well, then maybe Turkey spins up 1 million troops and they decide to move on Israel. I mean, like this can get out of hand very quickly, and I don't think people are taking it seriously.
Well,
enough.
yeah, I mean, you're talking you're talking about strategically, because tactically, he's right. The U.S. military could wipe them all out without a problem. Question is what happens afterwards.
Exactly.
So, we could blow up the world many times over already with the latest technology that they have, but it
does the
doesn't make
Muslim
sense.
world, I don't know. So, does the Muslim world really give a shit about what's happening in Gaza? There's a few protests, there's a few statements, but Saudi Arabia is not jacking up oil. Nobody gives a shit, honestly. The Gaza thing is kind of sad because it's the biggest act of performative sympathy that's so clearly fake. The Saudis don't give a shit, or they would just they would say, okay, $200 a barrel for oil now till there's a ceasefire. They could flip a switch. They don't give a shit. Okay, so that's all fake. Turkey, they don't really give a shit. They were just in Azerbaiján with Israel, purging Armenian Christians. Right, so Turkey and Israel are fine. Turkey doesn't really give a shit. That's something people make up. Iran says they kind of care, but not really. Hezbollah, they're not really doing anything.
Iran cares because it gives them leverage and gives them excuses to poke at the U.S. and Israel.
So
well, it's just another pawn that they have
on
on the chessboard. But every pawn is disposable now.
Well, I actually agree with Cerno on this, but I just think that this is representative of the government's perspective on what's happening in Palestine. That's not really representative of the people, because I think when you see, if you've seen those protests in Turkey, we're talking tens and tens of thousands of people, and they do not look like they're playing around. I just don't think that the government has any interest in actually coming to the aid of the
It's the inverse of here, where we're in America and we don't care about Ukraine, and our government says tough shit.
Yeah, you have to care.
Tough shit. We're sending the money anyway. Whereas in the Islamic world, the regimes don't care about Gaza, but the people do, and the regimes are saying, which is just another sign that we live under authoritarianism. Even though China, the CCP is a big threat, and look at Saudi barbarians. Look at America, dude. Talk to a conservative and say, are you more worried about the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas? Are you more worried that the FBI is going to assassinate you? Or are you more worried that you're going to get mugged, and if you punch the guy a little too hard in self-defense, that you're going to get indicted?
Or is the IRS going to audit you every single time?
You're lucky if that's all they do.
Yeah, that's
if they keep
easy.
it civil, you're actually... Yeah, but that's the way you... I remember I got into it with some guy who he worked with... He was a book agent, and he's worked with Ben Shapiro, so he should know better. And he said something of, why are conservatives worried about audits? And I said, well, how about you talk to Ben Shapiro? Because I bet you Ben Shapiro doesn't do this bookkeeping the way everybody else does.
He's come out and said on his podcast that he overpays his taxes multiple times. Yeah.
No,
that's a strategy a lot of people utilize.
And I got mad at the guy because the guy didn't reverse course. Because I believe if you're just objectively wrong, you should say, well, I was objectively wrong. No, I'm the same way. I overpay my taxes by tens of thousands of dollars a year, because then if I get audited, they can't make it criminal, because if they just make it civil, you spend a lot of money to fight it. But then if they get you on fraud, now it's a whole criminal case and you have a big problem. But in a free country, you shouldn't have to think like that.
No.
Right? Because there are things that my accountant's like, we'll just, we're not going to do this, or we're not going to fight them on that. California said I owed $5,000. I didn't. Just pay the extra. But you shouldn't have to live like that. So trying to get people like me to give a shit about the Houthis, good luck. They're so far down. Even if they are a real threat, I have way, way bigger boogeyman that are actually in the closet.
Yeah, that's some good context there. Phil, you tweeted a couple moments ago someone talking about how the Yemeni people are the only people that are acting in protecting international law and human rights. And then we have the next article here detailing how the Houthis restored slavery in Yemen, which brings us to, of course, a lot of other countries' involvement here. We're hearing also saber rattling from Russians, but I seem to definitely agree with Mike's kind of approach to here. We hear a lot of saber rattling. We see a lot of different kind of moves and positioning being made on this larger kind of grand chessboard, but what does it really amount to when, of course, internally there's a lot of other civil strife. There's a lot of other things to worry about and be concerned about. I worry about this situation expanding and, of course, becoming a bigger global conflict and fight. I think that's a legitimate concern to have here. But domestically, there are other threats here. And, I couldn't agree more with you, Mike.
Quick question for you guys, because, I realize that governments have never really represented their people, but it does feel to me, and maybe this is the reason I'm asking you guys to see if I'm crazy or not.
You're crazy.
Yeah, maybe it's just like my path in the red pilling process, but I feel as if there has never been a time, certainly in my life, where more governments the world over are more brazenly disrespecting the people that they rule over.
I agree.
The
But,
13th,
well-
the 13th grievance in the Declaration of Independence was that the king and parliament didn't represent the people. So this has been happening for a very long time, 250 years at least in America.
I think that when it comes to, I think the internet has changed so much, and so much about the world that we live in. I think that there's a lot of things that happened prior to the internet that people weren't nearly as aware of, or didn't talk as openly with other people about, even though there is a certain degree of censorship and stuff that happens on most places on the internet. And I think that has to be put into any context that you're any kind of situation where people are like, oh, I'm noticing this recently in the past, blah, blah, blah. I kind of feel like you have to take into account the fact that we live in a post internet in your pocket world where everyone's
Undoubtedly,
connected.
yeah.
I
That
think
changes a
that
lot.
makes a big difference to the way that we perceive things.
The big difference with the regime is they've quit lying, which is why I think it's different than disagreements in the past. So, for example, when they want to do the first Iraq war, the American public was kind of split, didn't want to do it. Then they had the woman come up, oh, they're killing babies in incubators and bayoneting them and playing for fun. And they shifted sentiment with the lie. Gulf of Tonkin was a lie. But every war in our modern life is based on lie, unless you think that Pearl Harbor wasn't known in advance. But at least you had to lie. Now they're just like, oh, yeah, we know that you guys don't give a shit about Ukraine. Like, we don't care. We're going to send the money anyway. Oh, you voted Republican and you got out the vote. Okay, thanks. Thanks for playing, but we're still going to send them the money.
Right.
So they're not even trying to lie to us now. They're not even trying to con us. So like what they're doing with Trump. No, like Mar-a-Lago's were $25 million.
Yeah, it's
Right.
so brazen. It
Yeah,
is,
yeah. They're just like, no, we're just going to do this. And there's really nothing that you can do about it. Oh, yeah, January 6th was an insurrection. No, it wasn't. Who cares? Right? So there's always been the case where the government did things that people didn't agree with necessarily, but they were able to, through some kind of form of consent, even if it was based on fraud.
Right.
Right? So the
They don't even lie.
Yeah, now we're just going to do kind of what we
just
want.
disregard.
Yeah,
it.
well, they're becoming very bold. They're becoming bolder than ever. As even just a couple days ago, the New York Times reported how 40,000 weapons worth $1 billion that the United States sent to Ukraine have not been tracked. Where are they? Who are they in the hands of? We don't know. As of course, there's a lot of very interesting videos of Palestinians with AR-15s. Not specifically AR-15s, but
Right, M4s,
American M4s, American service rifles that look like AR-15s. There's also a lot of intel reports of a lot of shady groups and organizations, including Middle Eastern terrorists, that now have NLAWs, that now have specific air-to-ground surface missiles that they could use on airliners. That's a legitimate intelligence report that came out specifically detailing a lot of the weapons in Ukraine go missing. Who do they end up in the hands of? Well, some of the worst people in this world. And this is why, as you were just kind of referencing before, there could be something legitimate. And everyone's automatically going to say, "Oh, no, that's the government doing this again." When again something really goes off and is really crazy here. And again, it's kind of a tit for tat situation, specifically when it comes to Iran versus the United States. We are seeing a little bit of escalations there, and I wanted to ask you guys: will we kind of see a larger conflict between Iran and the United States? Because Lindsey Graham really wants this, Nikki Haley really wants this. There might be some people that they might be able to convince, but majority of people won't fall for it. And
It is an election year.
yeah, well, an election year, anything could happen. As of course, there's stories of now the Iranians seizing U.S.-controlled oil tankers, the United States seizing Iranian tankers. There's a back and forth going here. There's an economic war going on here. The Democrats usually like to start a war with Russia. The Republicans really like to usually start a war and escalate a war with Iran in the Middle East. Will we see a conflict with Iran this year or maybe in the future? What do you guys think?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when John Bolton called for Israel to bomb Iran. So this has been, they've wanted this to happen for some time.
No, absolutely. It's been in the
40
works
years.
for a very long time, especially under the Project for a New American Century, especially with General Wesley Clark, who I've
Westlaw-
talked to, and I asked him about this specific reference that he previously made before, essentially how the Pentagon detailed their larger plans to invade 7 countries in a few years. It took them longer to achieve a lot of their goals, but a lot of their goals were achieved, and one of the countries that the U.S. Pentagon was going to bomb and attack was, of course, also Iran on that very specific list. So
it's,
will there ever be a conflict, or will there always be this kind of back and forth with China having a larger influence here, maybe acting like a deterrent or acting like a party that, of course, would take advantage of the situation? How do you guys think that situation could
like
unfold?
Wesley Clark said, there was going to be 7 nations toppled in 5 years, and this was planned in the days after 9/11. But I actually have some military veterans that have DM'd me saying that they had these plans drawn up on their boards, sitting all over their offices in the year 2000. So this had nothing to do with 9/11. This was a plan from the neoconservatives, the Project for New American Century. They intended to do this probably since the early 90s, if not sooner. So it's no surprise. I tend to think that they will eventually move on Iran. I think that there's a tremendous imperative to catalyze a wider war, primarily because of the debt issue that we're dealing with, I think that they realize that they're kind of like the sand is getting low in the hourglass, and they're like, all right, we're going to have to make these tactical maneuvers while the purchasing power of the dollar still is superior to the rest of the world. This is kind of the Thucydides trap that people talk about with China and the U.S. Well, that trap has a ticking time bomb on it, and it's the national debt, and it's not getting any better. So I think it's going to happen here soon.
It's going to be interesting to see how this entire kind of situation unfolds, because everyone's looking at the Middle East. A lot of other people are looking at Sweden, as their government ministers and military officials recently came out and said, hey, we got to do everything we can to prepare for war. Now, is this more saber rattling? Is this more fear mongering? As of course, now we have reports of Sweden's mental health helplines being flooded as the young people there are scared of another potential war with Russia. As the government there specifically pointed out Russia as a country that might be soon invading them if, of course, Sweden joins and signs up to NATO. How do you guys think that situation will unfold before we go over to Rumble, where we're going to discuss completely different topics that are going to be really fascinating?
I don't think that, as much as, Russia is a significant size military and stuff, I don't imagine that they're going to be looking to invade Sweden like right after the war with Ukraine. Look, I would have said they're not going to invade Ukraine, so what the heck do I know? But at the same time, I feel like Ukraine is unique, and they have a unique relationship with Russia, whereas Sweden doesn't have that same kind of history.
Well, I'll do something I rarely do, which is kind of give credence to the neoconservative perspective that if we show weakness, why wouldn't they make moves that they otherwise wouldn't? And that's not entirely untrue. As much as I oppose all of this intervention, if it is proven that the entire financial and military support of NATO for Ukraine amounted to piss in the wind, well, then why wouldn't they potentially start to push back NATO on additional areas of their border? I tend not to think that they'll do it just simply because it amounts to, you'd have Article 5. It would be a very easy, launch into a world war potentially. So I don't think that they have any interest in that. I think that they wanted Ukraine because they wanted Sebastopol, and that's as simple as it gets. But I could be wrong.
We got some super chats here that I think are worth noting before we go over to anyone else who wants to comment on that. One from the internet guy saying Pen 15. I don't know what that means. He also gave another super chat saying, side note, absolutely love Cerno's content lately. Keep fighting the good fight. Yeah, man, you've been posting for quite a while. You release a lot of good stuff. So you're.
What do you mean lately? He's been solid forever.
No, forever.
I'm giving a hard time to the.
Okay, got it. We got another super chat from Thinker for Life saying we need a shirt that shows the media is owned and shows the financial structure. It's more important message than the lies. I can help with art if you want. I emailed you on September 22nd. Big news. We'll make sure that someone from the team goes checks that out. Another super chat emoji gifting from Fleeting Floating Feathers, and another one from T-Tog saying, do you think the EU will fall? Will the EU fall? Well, they're definitely going through a lot of very significant problems themselves, especially when it comes to the open borders that they have, especially when it comes to a large number of taxes and socialism that they have. Will they ever fail? No, I think they'll be conquered and kind of taken over as they already have been from within. But that's just my personal take on it. What do you guys think?
I don't know enough about the EU's internal politics to make reliable comments on it.
I think that
honestly.
the biggest problem with the EU is that you have kind of this overarching union, but there's a lot of independent governance. It's kind of like the United States in that way, but you now have some of the more productive states that have more of a free market approach, less socialism, that are producing a huge amount of what ends up going into the coffers of the overarching governmental system. So I think that there will eventually that will sow discontent amongst the high producing nations like Germany against the low producing nations, and because of that, I think that it'll ultimately dissolve, which is the same reason I have the thesis about the United States eventually dissolving.
I mean, who knows what's going to happen here? As of course, a lot of the people who do wield a lot of power don't really care about nation states. They kind of care about themselves. They care about their own interests. And people have to kind of, in my opinion, get rid of this notion that America is acting for America. It's not. America has been hijacked by a group of crazy sociopathic individuals that are acting on their behalf and using America as a vessel, I would say even as a tool, adult tool that we can't mention here on this family-friendly broadcast.
Give us 5 minutes.
And yes, we're about to transition over to, of course, Rumble, and then finally be able to kind of speak more freely, as of course YouTube is very censorious and doesn't allow us to fully express our speech as freely as we want. But before going over to Rumble, I wanted to specifically shout out U.S. Senator Rand Paul, as of course I think he has the biggest W of today, as yesterday he came out with a very interesting video kind of hinting the fact that he might be potentially making a big announcement surrounding the 2024 presidential election on the Republican ticket. Everyone thought he was maybe going to be endorsing somebody, and he came out today very proudly saying that he supports #NeverNikki, going against Nikki Haley and the establishment candidate that she is with her neoconservative war hawkish policies. Here's the video from U.S. Senator Rand Paul with a brilliant troll that he just committed on everyone.
Good morning, everyone. As I told you yesterday, I'm ready to say something about the presidential race. I've had a long relationship with Donald Trump, and there's a lot to like there. I'm also a big fan of a lot of the fiscal conservatism of Ron DeSantis. I think Vivek Ramaswamy's been an important voice. Also have listened to and met with the independent Bobby Kennedy. I'm not yet ready to make a decision, but I am ready to make a decision on someone who I cannot support. So I'm announcing this morning that I'm Never Nikki. And if you go to nevernikki.net, you can let her know that you're not a supporter either. I don't think any informed or knowledgeable libertarian or conservative should support Nikki Haley. I've seen her attitude towards our interventions overseas. I've seen her involvement in the military-industrial complex, $8 million being paid to become part of the team. But I've also seen her indicate that she thinks you should be registered to use the internet, that people posting ideas anonymously. I think she fails to understand that our republic was founded upon people like Ben Franklin, Sam Adams, Madison, John Jay, and others who posted routinely. For fear of the government, they posted routinely anonymously. And I think her failure to really understand that, or to think that you should register through the government somehow for the internet, is something that should disqualify her in the minds of all libertarian-leaning conservatives. So I'm announcing today I'm Never Nikki. You can go to nevernikki.net and sign up and show her that you're Never Nikki also. Thanks.
I love it. Brilliant troll or brilliant troll? What do you guys think?
Rand Paul's for a long time. Rand Paul's been my favorite senator, so I'm
No surprise,
pro-Rand
right?
Paul. What?
No
No
surprise.
surprise. I mean, his dad's the guy that brought me to kind of like libertarian ideas and stuff. So between Ron, Tom Woods, and a few other people, those are the guys that really put the bug in my ear.
To me, it's not at all surprising he would do this, but it definitely is gratifying for me because like people ask me who I'm going to endorse oftentimes, and I'm just like, not Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
That's basically the only answer I ever had for him. So it was pretty.
I said I'd vote for the Republican nominee a few months back, even Haley, and I don't think so anymore.
If it was Haley, I don't think that I could.
Yeah, I don't. A few months ago, I would have, in all sincerity, but I don't think so.
Well, Vivek had a very interesting perspective on all of this when we had him here during the town hall. And one of the things that he said specifically is that the establishment's long game here could be putting Nikki Haley into a position of power over a Democrat because she essentially serves the establishment more than anyone else.
Yeah,
They're chipping away at the First Amendment, and they're doing it since January 6th. They're doing it by they're attacking the grievances. They're going after religion in different spaces, and this whole register through the government thing that Nikki Haley's preaching goes against free speech. So we're seeing an attack on the First Amendment, and we're seeing them chip away at it. And I think that's really important to notice, that it's the establishment that's leading this attack against the First Amendment.
Yeah, and I think that'll be great. I think they really want Nikki in there. I think that can be the long play here, as Vivek announced.
I think that's because there's very little daylight between Nikki Haley and Hillary Clinton.
There's so much daylight between her ears, though.
But if you think about the type of policy that Nikki Haley would prefer compared to the type of policy that Hillary Clinton, like what major policy position would they have a significant difference on?
She would want 35% top tax bracket versus 38.
Yeah, right. Like those are the differences.
She is the old school, do nothing GOP guard.
And I mean, yeah, you do the meme too between what's the big difference between Democrats and Republicans, and it's but it's true. There's not a significant difference between Nikki Haley and Hillary Clinton.
There is a difference that's important in that if you have a Republican president in there, the Republican base, at least historically, goes along with whatever they say. So this is the reason.
Yeah.
If you're going to have Hillary Clinton in there,
make it
Hillary Clinton.
Make it Hillary, yeah.
Don't
absolutely.
make it Nikki Haley.
Yep.
So I finally was able to find the website now, and it shows this like very dark, sinister image of Nikki Haley, like she's in a horror film. And then he asks people to sign up. I don't know what he's collecting information for. Maybe it's for his kind of Senate run or his kind of collection, but it's essentially the video and his short message to Nikki Haley. But excellent troll by U.S. Senator Rand Paul here. Definitely something that we need more of, as of course, if we're not laughing, we're crying. And this political election cycle is absolutely crazy. We're here on the front lines covering it here at Vivek's headquarters. We're going to be embedding with Vivek on his campaign trail tomorrow all day long. We're going to be doing a very special video about just 24 hours with Vivek. We're going to see how he wakes up, what he eats, what's his routine, what he's going to be into, what he's going to be doing. You can see that video on, of course, our YouTube channel when, of course, we're going to be making it. You could see the making of that in the process on Twitter and on Instagram on Luke We Are Change, as, of course, we are soon going to be moving over to Rumble. I think, Josie, you wanted to say something before we move over. Is that correct?
I was going to say that there's a video of Nikki Haley saying that her influence or inspiration was Hillary Clinton. So
she ain't lying.
No, makes sense. This, as of course, we're also right now on the front page of Rumble. We are the #1 recommended video. So if you're watching right now on any other platform but Rumble, this is the time to go over to, of course, rumble.com, where you could see our live broadcast. You could also go to rumble.com/wearechange, and you'll be able to find us there directly. As of course, we just started this podcast about a month and a half ago, and we already have 80,000 followers. The views that we've been getting have been absolutely incredible here on this independent media broadcast, and that's mainly because of your support, you guys watching, you guys sharing this broadcast. We're going to be taking callers in the second hour, all through lukeunfiltered.com. And before we, of course, go over from YouTube to Rumble, where can people find out more information about you guys before we transition off here?
Josie.
I'm the Redheaded Libertarian. You can find me at TRHLofficial on X.com. I host a show called Spaces with Josie on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays, and that airs live on X, and it also airs for members only on timcast.com. So you can go head over there, become a member, and help support our work.
Clint Russell, host of Liberty Lockdown, co-host of Tower Gang. Do not subscribe to Tower Gang. It's terrible. Don't do it.
Don't do it.
But Liberty Lockdown is actually really good. So you should subscribe to that. And you should subscribe to this, and you should share it around because, trust me, the second hour of the show is a totally different beast. Cerno was already letting loose. I was holding back. We're going to go ballistic. It's going to be fun. Don't miss it. Phil.
100K subscribers and Clint gets tasered.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And I get tased at 100K, but at 200K, I get to tase him for twice as long. So it's going to be amazing.
I don't know about the twice as long part, but we'll negotiate that later.
I am Phil That Remains on X. I am Phil That Remains Official on Instagram. The band is All That Remains. You can follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, Pandora, Amazon Music, YouTube, the internet.
Mike?
Yeah, MikeCernovich.substack.com. Yeah, I was cussing. I didn't realize it was not cussing, but yeah, so we'll be even wilder on Rumble, I guess.
It wasn't too bad, but we'll get pretty wild on Rumble. I specifically want to talk about health and wealth because we talked about a lot of the problems. I kind of want to reframe the conversation towards being the strongest, best, happiest version of yourself. And I think health is something that you've been talking about, Mike, for a very long time. And I think we could also share our own personal journeys and stories about this because if you're not living a good, happy life, what are you doing? You're losing. The best way to win is to have family, have wealth, have health. That conversation, again, YouTube doesn't like these conversations. That's something that also gets censored heavily on YouTube. You're on YouTube right now. What are you doing? Go to rumble.com/wearechanged. The conversation is going to get absolutely crazy, absolutely spicy. Clint, I think you have something to say.
I just wanted to say real quick, I reached out to Mike because I had heart arrhythmia, and he gave me a list of supplements to use, and I've been using them ever since, and it seems to have helped. So I wanted to thank you for that.
I had a health scare too, and I was like, Mike, you're MD Mike, help me out here. And then you gave me some good information as well here. So Mike definitely knows a lot of really interesting stuff when it comes to taking care of yourself. So we're going to be talking about that, plus a lot more conversation. Again, this is always difficult because I don't know what you guys are doing here on YouTube. Get over right now to rumble.com